I just received a fresh roll of Kodak Portra 400 back from the lab, and I can't wait to see what images are on these negatives. However, rather than asking the lab to scan my film, I really enjoy the process of scanning negatives at home. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through my workflow, the setup that I have, the camera settings that I use to get high quality scans from my Sony a7 III and 50mm macro lens. So let's go. I use Take It Easy Lab in Leeds to develop my colour negatives. They offer a great service, affordable prices and a reasonable turnaround. But one thing I always request is to have my negatives sent back to me uncut. And that's why they've been sent back rolled up inside this little film pot. Having your negatives uncut and as one long continuous roll makes scanning at home so much easier. So tip number one for home scanning is when you send your film to be developed, request that it comes back uncut. One of the biggest challenges with scanning film at home is dust, and believe me, I have my battles too. And I've got two cats, so cat hairs get absolutely everywhere. So before I start, I'm going to give my scanning area and work surfaces a quick wipe down with a microfiber cloth, and then I'm going to give it some time for any dust to settle. The constant battle to keep your negatives completely dust free is a never-ending war. To help win that battle, I keep all my negative scanning equipment in a large plastic tub like this. It keeps it dust free when I'm not using it, and I only get it out when it's time to scan my negatives. Another top tip for scanning film at home is to get yourself a really solid copy stand. I used to scan my film with an inverted tripod, but since I purchased this heavy duty copy stand from eBay, it's made my life so much easier. However, due to the size of the copy stand and me using a 50mm lens, I do have to raise my scanning equipment up with this little stand. The first piece of equipment from my box that I'll add to my scanning setup is this Kodak LED light panel. I picked this up from Amazon for cheap, and it's just big enough for me to scan my negatives. Having said that, I might have been better off with a slightly larger size, but this one does the trick for me. One of the most integral pieces of kit in my scanning setup is this. It's the Essential Film Holder, and I highly recommend picking one of these up. It's an absolutely awesome piece of kit, and you can buy lots of different masks to scan lots of different sized film. I'll be using the standard 35mm mask for scanning these negatives, but I've also got a 35mm mask that has the sprocket holes visible. I've got a half frame mask and a 645 mask for scanning my medium format film. The camera that I use for scanning my negatives is the Sony a7 III, which is a full frame mirrorless camera. The benefit of using a mirrorless camera is you can use focus peaking to assist you and make sure that your negatives are bang in focus across the frame. I use the Sony 50mm f2.8 macro lens, and that also helps ensure sharpness at close focusing distances across the whole frame. One of the things I really like about this lens, you can use the autofocus to get almost there, flick the switch over to manual focus and fine tune with your focus peaking. To get my camera set up and everything in the right position, I'll use a scrap piece of film that I've saved. Now the reason I use this is because I can handle it, I can move things, and I don't have to worry about getting the film covered in fingerprints. So it's handy to keep a little piece of scrap like this just for lining everything up. The camera settings I use for scanning negatives are aperture priority, and then I'll set the aperture to f8 and I'll set the ISO to 100. Next I'll set the white balance and I'll set it to 5000 Kelvin to match the Kodak Light Box. Then once I'm all set up and I'm ready to handle my newly developed film, I'll pop on some of these fabric gloves so I don't get fingerprints all over my negatives. Now comes the exciting part, seeing my negatives for the first time since they've come back from the lab. Just looking at the first few photos, these look absolutely awesome and I can't wait to scan them. So let's get to it. First things first, let's get rid of that little piece of waste negative and we'll start loading the film into the Essential Film Holder. Once I've got the first image into position, I like to double check the focusing to check it's going to be sharp across the frame. Using an aperture of f8 should give me a sharp image across the frame, and I use focus peaking to assist me with getting everything bang in focus. Next up, I'll set the shutter to have a 2-second delay so it avoids any camera shake after pressing the shutter button. Before scanning each frame, I'll give it a quick blow with one of these sensor dust blowers. Finally, I'll switch off all the lights and scan each frame one at a time. After carefully scanning all the images, I'll carefully roll my negatives back up and put them back into the little film pot, just in case there was any issues with my first scans and I need to redo it. Once I'm happy with the scans, I will cut the negatives and store them in my folder. Now, let's take the memory card out with my Sony a7 III, pop it into the card reader, boot up the Mac so we can have a look at those negatives. I've backed up my scans onto an external hard drive and imported them into Lightroom, and at first glance they look absolutely awesome and I can't wait to see them in full colour. To invert the negatives and edit the photos, I use Lightroom and the Lightroom plugin Negative Lab Pro. So there's my complete setup and workflow for scanning 35mm negative film. It's a process that I enjoy and I get results that I'm really happy with. Here's a few images from that roll of Kodak Portra 400 so you can see the results. If you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful, give it a like. And if you'd like to see my complete workflow of using Lightroom and Negative Lab Pro to invert my negatives and edit film photography, subscribe to my channel and look out for that in a future video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.